Luang Por Khao's personality. Anyone who has been to pay respects to Luang Por Khao in person will know his character well. Luang Por Khao was immensely kind and benevolent, meditative. Those who meet him or pay respects to him never want to leave his side. Many people share the sentiment that they feel at peace when in his presence. Whenever someone has a problem, they will always come and ask Luang Por for help. He was truly benevolent. His benevolence manifested physically in actions and demeanor that were always bright and friendly. He was magnanimous with everyone, regardless of wealthy status or impoverished status. He was equally kind to all. His benevolence manifested verbally in a tone of voice that was soft and gentle. His tone of voice didn't strike out at anyone, inflict pain, or leave bruises. Each Dhamma phrase contained immense value. The same Dhamma phrase, when read from a manual or heard from another teacher, made no impact. But when it came from Luang Por Khao's mouth, it made a deep impact. The listener embraced the Dhamma and proceeded to apply those themes in their practice. For instance, Luang Por would say, "Do chanting every night before you sleep," and people would really do as he instructed. He would tell them to do sitting meditation, samadhi, while focusing on the parikama phrase, putto, and they would really go and do that. Or he'd tell them to observe the 5 precepts with a pure mind, and they would really do it. Whatever Dhamma he taught them, they'd embrace it and practice it according to their respective abilities. Luang Por Khao's benevolence in actions and speech were a true reflection of the benevolence within his own pure heart. This benevolence was embedded in his movements in various postures, iriyapata. His gaze and facial expressions were amiable, cheerful, and always welcoming of his guests. Not once did some latent evil flare up in his physical or verbal actions, kiriya. This peaceful coolness reaches into the depths of the hearts of those who have met him. Every monk, novice, samanera, and layperson who listened to Luang Por explain the Dhamma did so in attentive silence. They each grasped 1 or 2 of Luang Por's Dhamma models, ubaya. That Dhamma was of great value to that individual. Even if they had previously heard that same Dhamma from a different source, once they heard it from Luang Por Khao, they felt a deeper appreciation for it. This was because the Dhamma had been filtered through Luang Por's great benevolence. The Dhamma came from a teacher that they respected and believed in. That Dhamma carried great value. If you listen to Dhamma from a teacher that you do not respect, you will feel nonchalant about it. It practically doesn't have any significance. Luang Por Khao was respected by the community. Although the Dhamma that Luang Por explained was basic common Dhamma, the listener considered it significant and deeply meaningful. It's similar to when you receive something from royalty, from His Royal Highness the King or Her Royal Highness the Queen. Though that object may be ubiquitous, if you received it as a royal gift, that object is considered to be of immense value. You see it as auspicious and take very special care of it because it was given to you by someone you respect. Likewise, those who had received the Dhamma or any object from Luang Por Khao considered it to be highly auspicious. It is impossible to paint a picture that fully conveys Luang Por Khao's grace and benevolence, so this is where I'll leave it. The rains retreat, Vasa, ended, and I told Luang Por about my plans to practice mental cultivation in Chiang Rai province. Luang Por gave a sermon on various themes and methods for practicing mental cultivation, of which I was greatly appreciative. Then I took my leave of Luang Por and headed out to Ban Kut Tao to meet up with Phra Ācariya Thoon and prepare requisites, parikara, for our trip to Chiang Rai province. There were 10 monks and samaneras traveling to Chiang Rai together. Phra Ācariya Thoon, me, Phra Ācariya Wan, Phra Ācariya Charat, Phra Ācariya Rian, and 5 samaneras. After we had prepared our requisites, we were ready to start trekking. Once we reached Chiang Rai, we rested in Ban Lao, Thung Ko Sub-District, Vieng Chai District, Chiang Rai Province. Phra Ācariya Thoon stayed in Ban Lao, while the rest of us fanned out along the nearby villages in search of places to practice. I stayed in Ban Dong Wai. The villagers constructed a bamboo stretcher for me in February of 1969. One night, there were strong gusts of wind and rain. The wind tore trees apart and sent their broken branches flying. The umbrella tent, glot, I slept in could not withstand the wind, so I didn't set up my glot that night. I gathered my necessary requisites, secured them in my alms bowl, and wrapped the glot around my body and the requisites. However, the rain still drenched everything. I had to sit there on the bamboo stretcher, out in the rain, in the cold, the entire night. I was nesting under a large horse mango tree. The wind pummeled the branches of the large mango tree, and the tree lurched back and forth. I thought to myself, if the branches of this mango tree break, that is when my life will end. Because there was nowhere else that I could go that night. It was pitch dark in that dense forest. I couldn't see anything around me, and my flashlight was dim and nearly dead. That night, I made a determination, adhitthana. If I am to preserve the Buddhist religion for posterity, then may my life not come to an end at this time. That very moment, a large branch that had been swaying in the wind broke off and fell next to my bamboo stretcher. It was only 1 meter away from me. As I heard the sounds of the branch breaking, I focused my mind and thought, these are the final moments of my life now. However, my life's virtue dictated that it was not yet time to die, so I survived. After the wind and rain stopped, a colony of centipedes started swarming all over. They emerged to find food and crawled all over each other in every direction. Many came up to my stretcher. Many tucked themselves into my seat and tried to enter my upper robe. Many crept along my body, but I didn't react. That entire night, I had to sit and practice mental cultivation in the bitter cold. I thought back to the Buddha's time. The monks who had journeyed on Tudanga to various places must have encountered what I did. They braved those obstacles, survived, and attained enlightenment and became arahants. I will also brave and fight through these obstacles. I was determined to relinquish my life for Buddhism. I would fight on until my life came to its end. One night, as my mind, citta, entered a calm meditative state, I experienced a nimitta of rows and rows of coconut trees. Each row contained 4 half-meter tall trees. The first tree had large fruit overflowing and piled on the ground. The second tree was also a half-meter tall, but it had about half the fruit of the first tree. The third tree was a half-meter tall and contained only 3 fruits. The fourth tree was the same height, but did not have any fruit, only leaves. The second row of coconut trees were 1 meter tall. The first tree was filled with fruit. The second tree was the same height, but contained half the fruit of the first tree. The third tree was the same height, but had only 3 fruits. The fourth tree was the same height, but did not have any fruit, only leaves. The third row's trees were 2 meters tall. The fourth row's trees were 4 meters tall. The fifth row's trees were 5 meters tall. The coconut trees got progressively taller in levels. Each level and each row similarly contained 4 coconut trees with different amounts of fruit, as previously described. The last row of coconut trees was 40 meters tall and contained 4 trees just like the others. But these trees didn't have any leaves, just a stubby treetop jutting out to the sky. The first tree was filled with fruit. The second tree had half the fruit of the first tree. The third tree had 3 fruits. The fourth tree did not have any fruit at all. In that same vision, there was a coconut tree that was filled with fruit. This tree stood 8 feet tall. The trunk and the leaves appeared healthy and thriving. The knowledge arose that, this is my coconut tree. That very instant, it was as if I leapt up and hugged all of the coconuts. Then my mind withdrew from the meditative state. I used wisdom to analyze the nimitta and concluded that it pertained to practitioners and how the fruits of practice were not the same. I determined that it was like practitioners who started out at the same time in the same era. The trees were the same height, 1 meter tall, but the amount of fruit on each coconut tree differed. This indicated that the cultivated virtues and perfections of character, bārami, of each of the 4 individuals was not the same. Though they began practicing at the same time, the degree of attention to and effort in each individual's practice differed. Consequently, the fruits of their practice in this lifetime were not equal. The tree filled with coconut fruit represented one who had attained enlightenment and become an arahant. The second tree that contained half the fruit of the first tree represented one who had attained enlightenment and become a non-returner, anagami. The third tree, which contained sparse fruit, represented one who had attained enlightenment and become a once-returner, sakadagami, or a stream-enterer, sotapanna. The fourth tree that did not contain any fruit represented perfections of character that were not yet mature at this time. If one was diligent and applied greater effort, one could see the fruit of practice in this lifetime like the others. The coconut trees that got progressively taller by row represented how the same amount of time could go into practice but produce unequal amounts of fruit, just like with the first row of coconut trees. Each row of coconut trees that gradually got taller demonstrated this same concept. The coconut trees in the last row, that were 40 meters tall, represented the age of a practitioner that was in its final, Paccima stages. The lack of branches signified not having any more years to live. The stubby treetops sticking out symbolized a life and body that had aged to its ultimate peak. The trees having different amounts of fruit signified one person having attained enlightenment as an arahant, one person having attained enlightenment as an anagami, one person having attained enlightenment as a sakadagami or sotapanna, and another not having attained enlightenment at all in this lifetime. But if in a future life they get to be reborn into the era of the Mettaya Buddha, they will be a part of attaining enlightenment and becoming a holy individual, Arya Bukkala, of some level for sure.